So what we're going to do is we're going to do an overview first of the temple. And if you want more details, I've done like a 5-part series on the Millennium in Port Elizabeth a few years ago. And I did like 3 of those sessions on the temple itself. So you can actually go into more detail. But let's start with the gate. Okay, when you come to the gate, I'll just put these papers here. When you come to the gate here, this gate is measured in what's called cubits. Now the cubit is this distance from here to here. However, if you look at Ezekiel 40, it says that there's an angel with a rod. And that rod is 6 cubits long. So in chapter 40 and verse 5, there was a wall all on the outside of the temple all around, and in the man's hand was a measuring rod of 6 cubits. Okay? But look at the next point. It says, each of which was a cubit and handbreadth. That's very important. The fact that the the temple is measured with a rod of 6 cubits shows that there's something there to be measured. So 6 cubits is literal. The fact that it goes even more literal to each cubit is a cubit and a handbreadth shows that the angel's cubit is different, slightly different to our cubit, in the sense that his arm would have been longer than most Israelites of that day. The fact that it goes to a cubit and a handbreadth shows that the details are important. And the details are important because they're literal details. How do you make that symbolic, a cubit and a handbreadth? It's a literal thing. So you come to this gate and he measures it. And this gate is measured at 50 cubits long. So if you look on your other page and just hold on to that page, and I've got my own temple here. And I prefer this one, not because the diagram's better, but because all the scripture references are there as well. You'll see that the eastern gate is right here. That's that size compared to the rest of the temple. You'll see the gate is 50 cubits, which is 26.5 meters. If you look at that there. So on this, I've actually written at the bottom, 50 cubits equals 26.25 meters. Now, when you go up, right at the beginning, there are 7 stairs up the staircase. So you've come to the top of the mountain. To go into the temple, you've got to go up 7 stairs, and then you're faced with a wall. And that wall is 1 rod high and 1 rod wide. That's 6 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. That's a little over 3 meters. And the space between those 2 walls, where you walk through, is 5.25, I think, meters. So you can fit quite a few people arm in arm through there. And you have to walk 3 meters before you even get into the gate properly. Now, can you imagine? I'm like 1 meter 80 about. So it's taller than me, and it's wider than me, and it's more than double, maybe even triple, the length of me is the width of the doorway to go into it. And once you go in, you'll see there's guard rooms, three guard rooms on either side, and then right at the end you've got a porch area. That porch area is important because the prince is going to sit on that, and he's going to eat the sacrifices in that porch area. But this is the east gate. This is the gate which the glory of God in Ezekiel, in the time of Ezekiel, because remember, Ezekiel was in captivity and he was in exile, but the temple still stood when he was around. Ezekiel was from a priestly family. He would have found all this fascinating. And he was transported in a vision, and he saw the temple, and he saw it was all filled with all kinds of abominations. And therefore, he saw God's glory depart from the temple, go up to the Mount of Olives, and go up to heaven. What God is showing through this vision is the glory is going to come back. That's why, just as that glory left that temple, so the glory is going to come back into a literal temple. One is similar to the other, except one is unrighteous and one is righteous. Okay, so we go past that into the actual temple complex. And that gateway is the same dimensions and the same things in it as this gateway and this gateway, the north and the south. Okay. Now, also within those gateways, you've got pillars that go up 30 odd meters high. So you'll be looking up and you'll think, wow, it's extravagant, it's opulent, it's so fancy. So you'll come into here, and then you'll see that there's separate parts to this temple complex. This temple complex is 500 cubits. That's 262.5 5 meters, which is a quarter of a kilometer. That's the length of the complex and the width of the complex. It's a square. Between this between this gateway and this gateway, there's 100 cubits there, which is 52 point something meters. Now, inside these gates, these are called the inner gates, and you go into what's called the inner court. So every temple or tabernacle has an outer court, an inner court, and a holy place. And the holy place has different parts to it. So you'll see there, within that, there's an altar which we'll look at, and then you go up some steps into the temple itself. And the temple itself has a holy place and a holy of holies. Now backtrack to these gates here. These gates have 8 steps going up to them. And then the temple itself, we work out that it's got 10 steps going up to it, because there's pillars on either side of the stairway, which are 5 cubits each. So if each step is about half a cubit, then you've got 10 steps. So you're going 7, 8, 10. There's continual upward motion. So you've gone up the mountain, you go up into the outer court, up into the inner court, up into the holy place, because to get close to God, you just got to keep going up and up and up and up and up. Okay? So let's just quickly look at this outer gate. The inner gate. The inner east gate. You'll see that there's chambers, but this time the porch is toward the outer gate, outer court as well. But this is on the inner side. So the outer court is on this side. With the outer gate, the outer court was on the other side, so the porch was over here. This time, the porch is near the entrance, because the outer gate is on this side. So here you'll see on either side there are tables. And these tables are for slaughtering animals, and they're also for putting instruments down. There's tables where they put instruments down for the slaughtering of animals, for sacrifices. And we'll look at sacrifices just soon. But in one of the verses, it actually says, I think it's verse 43, it says, there were double hooks, 1 hand breadth in length, which were installed in the house all around, and on the tables was the flesh of the offering. So it's not even just a symbol of sacrifice. There's actual sacrifices on the tables. So, literal sacrifices. That will raise up questions. So that's there on the inner court. You'll see on the inner court there's an actual altar. And that altar, you'll see on your diagram, has 3 tiers to it. It has a base, and then it has the bottom tier, the middle tier, and the top tier. And the stairs going up on the east side of the altar. So we go to the actual temple itself, let me find the picture. So the temple itself. So right outside there's a bronze altar. There's an altar for sacrifice. But you'll notice that there's some differences here. One, there's no laver mentioned. There is no menorah mentioned. There is no altar of incense mentioned. And there is no table of showbread mentioned. There's no Ark of the Covenant mentioned. In fact, if you look at Jeremiah 3 verse 16, it says, "It shall be in those days when you are multiplied and increased in the land, declares the Lord, they will no longer say the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, and it will not come to mind, nor will they remember it again." There's also at the back of that temple, so that temple there is another 100 cubits, That temple there is another 100 cubits. Behind the temple, there's another space of 100 cubits, and this is something that people don't really know what it is. So it's called the separate area. Look at chapter 41, verse 12. "The building that was in front of the separate area at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall was 5 building, and its length was 90 cubits. And then verse 13 says, "Then he measured the temple 100 cubits long, the separate area with the building and its walls also 100 cubits long." This separate area behind the temple is 100. So you've got 100, 100, 100, 100, and 100 with the 2 gates equals 500 altogether. Okay, 4 100 spaces, 250 cubit spaces. That separate area, what is it? And was it for? Sorry? That's the question that we've got to answer. What is this separate area for? Every chamber around here has a purpose for it. So the separate area has to have a purpose for it. The word for separate area is this word. In Hebrew letters, Ha-Gizra. In English letters, Ha-Gizra. Gizra. And it comes from the word gazar, which means to cut or to cut off. It can be used to speak of circumcision. It can be used in terms of literal cutting or dividing or determining something. It can be used that. So I'm just going to quickly note the times this word gazar is used, and we're going to see that it really has a lot to do with destruction. So firstly, 1 Kings, chapter 3, verse 25. That's the time that Solomon, 2 ladies came to Solomon fighting over one baby and saying, "The baby's mine, the baby's mine, the baby's mine." So Solomon says, bring the sword and let's gazar the child. Let's cut the child in two. He uses this word. So cutting the child is to kill the child. It would be killing the child. 2 Kings chapter, I think it's 6 verse 4. Time of Elisha. And the men go to a place and they cut down trees. Gazar, cutting down. So we've got cutting in two, cutting down. Isaiah 9 and verse 20 talks about slicing off what is in the hand. Slicing off what is in the right hand. And it means eating food, consuming. So I can just put slicing off food. Eating food, consuming. And then Habakkuk 3 verse 17 speaks about cutting off from the fold of sheep. People being cut off from the fold means being separated and cut off, killed, destroyed.
And that same word is being used all the time
all the time, or the same root is being used. 2 Chronicles chapter 26 verse 21 speaks of being separate, excluded, cut off from the temple. So it's about exclusion. Psalm 88 verses 5 or verse 6 speaks about being cut off from God's hand. No access, excluded. And then Isaiah 53 verse 8 means cut off from the land of the living. Means dead. Cut off from life. Cut off from the land of the living. Then Leviticus chapter 16 verse 22 talks of being of the goat, the scapegoat they call it Azazel, where it's separated far away from God's presence and from Jerusalem, from the temple. It's chased out to a remote place. It's separated, it's cut off. It means out there, in the outer darkness, out there. Okay? There are 2 verses that give it different meaning, and I'm just going to put them so that you know that we're looking at all the references. Lamentations 4 verse 7, meaning the cutting of a precious stone, i.e. it's polishing. And we'd have to get John Rott to teach us about what that's like. But polishing a diamond, cutting the diamond, it uses that term. And the other time is, where is it? Yeah, Job 22 verse 28 speaks about making a decree. Okay, those are the 2 exceptions at the end. Every other time, it pretty much can be summarized with the idea of separation from God or separation from life, destruction, basically those kind of concepts. Cutting down trees, cutting a kid in half, it's all destructive terminology. So it's probably a place of destruction. Well, some kind of, not execution, destruction. Remember, the temple is holy, but it uses a different word to gazar for the temple. It uses this word, kadosh. This place, the gizra, kadosh. The gizra is excluded from the rest of the temple. It's a separate area. It doesn't touch the holiness of everything else around it. Okay? In a sense, it is outside of the holy place, outside of the temple, but it's part of the temple compound. Now, why is that? I think the best way to understand this is chapter 43 and verse 21. You shall also take the bull for the sin offering, and it shall be burned in the appointed place of the house, outside the sanctuary. In other words, the bull can't be burned. Parts are burnt on the altar, but the rest of it normally was burned outside the camp. But it won't be burned outside the camp because all of Jerusalem will be holy. So God puts this part in the temple and separates it from everything else as a perpetual fire to burn all those sacrifices in there. So the brazen altar, you offer up parts of the animal on the brazen altar, but the carcass and everything else you would burn outside. So here it says, you shall take the bull for the sin offering, and it shall be burned in the appointed place of the house outside the sanctuary. So here the sin offering is taken to another place to be burned. It's in the house somewhere, but it's not part of the sanctuary. So that's probably where it was burned, or it will be burned. Because the whole of the sin offering is not burned up on the altar. No. Only parts of the animal are offered on the... And then there's other parts that the people will eat, but the rest of the carcass will be burned in the appointed place. So that's what some people would say. They would say that appointed place where the bull is burned up would be in this place here. Let's just summarize this part. There's perfect symmetry in God's house. There's always an ascending up, 7 steps, 8 steps, 10 steps. On the walls, there's another piece of information. On the walls are carved all around, just like in Solomon's temple, palm trees, and in between the palm trees are cherubim, 2 faces of the cherubim, the lion and the man, one facing one side, one facing the other side. Because God's glory is always between the cherubim. Even on the Ark of the Covenant, God's glory was between the 2 cherubim. The glory of the Lord went out of the house. The glory of the Lord will come back in. And when it comes back in, that doorway of the eastern gate, the outer east gate, will be completely shut, never to be opened again. And that is to communicate to the people that God's glory will never depart from his house. He will always be there. So it's a guarantee to Israel that you will not again break my law to cause me to depart from your house. I will cause you to keep my laws. So most simple. So
the Lord will go in.
The glory of the Lord that left the temple here and went out by the east gate. The glory went to the Mount of Olives, and it went up to heaven. Now, Ezekiel says one day God's glory is going to come back in to the temple. When it does, this eastern gate will be completely shut, never to be opened, to signify that the glory of the house is shut. It's not going to leave.
So the priest can never go out again.
The priests are not going to come in this. No one's going to walk through this gate. The people are going to walk in through the south gate or through the north gate. Everybody. And when you come in through the south gate, you will exit via the north gate. And when you come in by the north gate, you'll exit via the south gate. Because the way you go in must be different to the way you come out. All right? So why does God give this house or this plan of the house to Ezekiel? Ezekiel 43 verse 10 to 12 gives us the reason why there's all these dimensions and there's all these measurements and everything. It says, "As for you, son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the plan. If they are ashamed of all they have done, make known to them the design of the house, its structure, its exits, its entrances, all its designs, all its statutes, and all its laws, and write it in their sight, so that they may observe its whole design and all its statutes and do them. This is the law of the house. Its entire area on the top of the mountain, all around, shall be most holy. Behold, this is the law of the house." So the law of this house is holiness. God wants Israel to hear about it so they can be ashamed of their deeds. So put it this way. Why did God's glory depart? Because of their iniquities, because of their following after other gods and worshipping those gods in God's house. And because, as we'll see, they brought uncircumcised people to serve in this house. And so God is saying, I'm leaving. It's almost like this. You're on death row. You know you deserve to die. And then just on the day when you're going to be hung, someone comes in and says, I'll hang in your place. So now you've got your life and you can't believe it. Now someone else comes up to you and says, by the way, here's a check for 1,000,000 rand. Now how do you feel? If there's any ounce of softness in you or of gratitude, you're going to feel overwhelmed. Because Jerusalem, let's look at Jerusalem. Jerusalem is going to be 25,000 cubits at this time. That means it's going to be 169 kilometers squared, because it's 25,000 cubits squared. It's going to be 169 kilometers squared. The present Jerusalem stands, and I've looked it up, stands at 125 kilometers squared. So that means Jerusalem in the millennial reign is going to be bigger than present day Jerusalem. It's going to grow, expand. Now get this. In Revelation, it says the new Jerusalem that comes out of heaven is going to be, if we work it out in kilometers, it's going to be 2,220 kilometers wide and high and long. That means that's going to be from Cape Town to Bulawayo. That's going to be the size of the city of the New Jerusalem that comes out of heaven. Think of it this way. Yeah, it's basically going to be 10,941,000,000 and something kilometers cubed. So put it this way, for Israel, they got R1,000,000. But for us, we'll get the R1,000,000 and then God will turn around and say, by the way, here's another billion. It's overwhelming. So that's the temple. It's to provoke Israel to desire God's holiness and to desire and to have hope that no matter what they go through, whatever Holocaust, whatever, God will restore his glory back to them. And therefore, they are to live holy lives.